years ago, many years ago, I was a writer for Star Trek Communicator, which is how I entered this franchise back in late '99. And I spoke to someone that I thought was basically a new actor, and it was atypical. I'm usually good with the research, and this person realized pretty quickly that I didn't know who she was, and it was embarrassing.
Oh, I mean, a little like you can be cute every now and then, if you're talking to someone that's actually like actual famous, and they're like, "Oh, you just have like no clue." And I like seeing the celebrities that realize that, and then like they're okay with it, right? Like they're not
Yeah.
like, "You don't know who I am." Like I'm
Well,
I'm,
she
I'm
was
Mr. So
probably
and
glad
so,
that I wasn't fawning. I mean, she probably gets a lot of that, but it was
right?
still embarrassing because what it said was newbie, and I was. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
relatively new. I mean, that was like 25 years ago. So, yeah.
yeah. And I guess you're always going to run into those situations where someone's like big in a niche,
Yeah.
and you introduce yourself into that niche, and you're like, "Well, I don't know anything about anything, so please excuse my ignorance."
So last year, I don't even remember which podcast it was, but I was a guest on a podcast, and he was discussing comics, and he
Mhm.
said to me, "So have you ever like, are you what other else are you into? Are you into Planet of the Apes?" And I just sort of looked for a second. I thought that was a joke
Right.
because, like, I've this is sounding like not humble bragging, but it's just simply like something a person would have seen if they'd gone to my website, which is that I've worked on like 11 Planet of the Apes books. So I was like, they're prominently mentioned on my website. So I was like, yeah, I've seen Planet of the Apes. I like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, you just did some work on the RPG that's coming up, right?
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to discuss that too, we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these conversations, Star Trek's the glue, right? Like that's what
Mhm.
brings everyone together. But I don't think even a third of any of these conversations stays on Star Trek, especially like with people
Oh,
that are
no
like
podcast
actively
I've
writing.
ever been on has ever stayed
Right.
on. It never does. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could try, but Star Trek is as much of a reflection of everything else as its own
Yeah.
thing. So, like, there's no way to talk about Trek and be just on Trek.
Star Trek is at the core of sci-fi fandom, and it is a catalyst for discussion. And people who are into Star Trek tend to be into 83 other franchises. It just does this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, because Star Trek means so many different things to so many people. I mean, it has
Exactly.
enough hours and creative content that what brought me to it was the spaceships and the military science fiction aspects. So, like, I could talk all sorts of stuff about like the spaceships and the designs and which ones I like and which ones I don't. And as much as it's not a military show, it still has
It's
the
paramilitary,
hanging ons.
if
Right.
nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'd much rather talk about like, Wrath of Khan 2 than Star Trek 4 because 2 has like the Das Boot feel to it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Planet of the Apes has that RPG coming out this year, or is that coming out next year?
I'm a little unclear on this myself. I'm going to
Okay.
because it's. I think that this stuff is still in the planning. The Kickstarter finished, and I was hoping it would be out this year. We'll see. I haven't been told yet. So
Okay. Yeah, that's a frequent refrain from authors is that they've done their part and now it's up to marketing, sales, and the powers that be.
what I won't say. But we're not recording yet, right?
I mean, I am, but
Oh,
like
okay.
I edit all this stuff afterwards.
Okay.
Like we're not live streaming, so if you start going on a cursing tirade, no problem.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's fine. We can keep this in. I just wasn't. I was like, I'm thinking about like, there's actually nothing wrong with this. Which is this: when you write for franchises, very often what happens is uh, you turn your work in, and
Hmm.
you assume it's going to be out at a certain time in a certain publication, and then depending on the franchise and the publisher and the people involved, it could be 2 years later. You just don't
Right.
always know, or never. You
Right.
never really know. But the thing is, by that point, you're usually onto something else. So you're just sitting back, not even in that headspace anymore. So it's okay.
Right. And there's like two different aspects to it in that like there's the public release and then there's the networking and the professional like relationships that you're building. Like you've done your part and you've built that relationship. And if that went well, then you can keep doing stuff with them.
Right.
Um, which
Yeah.
I know that Modifius and Titan have a really interesting uh, relationship going right now, Star Trek authors, where like brand new people are coming in through the Explorer fiction stuff, and brand new people are also coming in through Modifius, and then depending on how like those relationships and that content's received by both the IP owners, they're showing up on like cross-platform stuff.
Yeah.
I've talked to a
I've
couple
noticed
people
that
that,
too.
yeah, I've
Well,
spoken to a
I
couple
actually
authors that
I'm one of
were.
the Titan writers, and I've done one thing for Modifius, but it was just one small piece.
See, yeah, that more crossover. Which
Yeah,
I don't think like company wise there's any synergy between the two of them, but the
not
Star
that I'm
Trek
aware of.
creatives are, yeah,
Not that I'm aware of. No, in this case, it was because of my Star Trek comics journalism background. That Modifius wanted a piece, a sidebar that was about the Gold Key comics and the UK strips. And I'm usually the go-to guy when people want something regarding the UK strip. So there you go.
right,
That was so it really was like totally unconnected to the stuff. Actually, at the
right,
time, I don't even think had I even joined the Titan team at that point. I might not have. I don't. I
right.
maybe. I think it was back when I was working on the Eaglemoss books. I think it was before I'd even joined the Titan team.
Yeah, which is a good callback to our earlier conversation, which is asking if you own any Star Trek books, which I'm assuming that entire bookcase is.
So what you see behind you, uh, that's that side there, yeah, is actually I'm going the wrong way. Well, whatever. It's mirror image on my screen. I'm confusing myself.
Right.
Is every Star Trek comic ever published, and below the camera line is the complete set of the Eaglemoss books, which I'm happy to have. So
Yes, I am. I'm very jealous of that Eaglemoss collection because I got into it
they're not
about
easy
six
to get.
months. Yeah, I got into it about 6 months before they went under, and they were doing some like really crazy deals there towards the end, where like before they announced that they were going out of business, and I was
Yeah,
like, heck yeah, man, bring it on! You want to send me 2 or 4 issues a month? Like, let's do it. And you got half price books on your website. I'll go buy a whole bunch of
they
those
had to
there. And
clear out their warehouse.
yeah,
Once you lose a license, it's
and
you got to get rid of the stuff.
I think I got up to about 40 or 50 issues into it. I was looking up there and they're about an eyeball. I got about 40 issues in, which there's a few more than 40 books in that collection.
Well,
And
including the specials, the books,
mhm,
there's 150. So
yeah, so
yeah,
like I've talked to a few people on Facebook and Reddit and that, and they're like, oh, it's so easy, just go on eBay and buy them. And I'm like, yeah, but the people on eBay know what they're selling and they know
also,
like
not all of them are available. There are some that are pretty hard to find. I
uh,
just because I was the editor,
mhm,
so therefore I was comped. I don't know that I would have ended up with them all either if I hadn't been on the team. From what I
yeah,
understand, people were having trouble with some, and I felt bad about that. It was beyond my control because the creative side and the business side were totally separate arms. I had absolutely nothing to do with the business side. And I would, let them know people were complaining, but nothing
yeah.
I could do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen that from Ben Robinson on Twitter a few times, where he said that we're hearing the complaints, but we're trying to get the business side of things
Yeah.
rolling in the right direction, but unfortunately they were never able to get the ship
Sadly,
going
no.
in the right way. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is a shame because I had their Starship collection as well. Now that I was able to finish with the
Oh,
help
good.
of some
How many were there?
like, oh goodness, there was about 160 of those.
Oh, I thought it was more than that. Okay.
Well, okay, so
See,
there's
that's
there's
that's your special, like your area of special interest.
right,
Mine's the comics, so I was focused on that.
right.
Yeah.
So there's hairs to split there though, because they had their subscription service, then they had the bonus issues, then they had special issues.
Mm.
So the main one had like 160 issues, and then they had like 20 special issues and about 20 bonus issues, and then they had a completely different collection of Discovery, and I think they did a couple card issue.
Oh, so it's well over 200 then.
Yeah, well over. It's just that like that what always gets me is the checklist mentality. So I was like, if they're numbered, I'm there. And I thought I had an out when they were like, "Oh, we're not going to number the bonus issues or
Mm.
the special collection issues," but then they started numbering them. So I ended up buying a whole bunch of those as well.
See, I'm a
And now,
completist. I buy stuff that no sane person would ever buy. So
yeah,
yeah.
I've that's a good segue because I've seen like when you've mentioned like buying like just like crazy comics from like South America or something like that on the Facebook group that you run, which is Star Trek. Is it Star Trek Comics Weekly?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lately, my friend Mark Martinez has been keeping the ball rolling there because I've been unavailable to post.
Hmm.
But yeah, I created that. It's based on a column I had been writing for years called Star Trek Comics Weekly. It started at Eaglemoss's website, but when they went under, I continued it for a while on my own blog. I just haven't had time because I'm busy writing something not Star Trek related. When I
Right.
finish it, I will go back to that.
Yeah. And I'm eternally grateful for you letting me post all the stuff to my website on that group
Of course,
because
anything
it's
Star
great
Trek
to.
related is welcome.
Yeah, I just absolutely love like sparking the conversations.
Mhm.
Both there and on the Trek BBS. The BBS guys are a little more hair splitting on like being outraged that this character that was referenced once in the '60s show has a different haircut in a flashback that they did in a comic book, and I'm like, guys, I mean, come on, like, okay,
People who
but
get upset about stuff like that, part of it is that they don't understand how the comics industry works. There's
hmm
likeness rights that, in some cases, there are some actors who are more litigious than others. And if the
right,
character looks like them, you might have a lawsuit if there were no likeness rights. So putting a beard on a non-bearded character, for example, will fix that, or changing the hairstyle will fix that because there are some actors who are known. I don't mean with Star Trek. I just mean as a general rule. There are some actors who will not give likeness rights, and that is, of course, they're absolutely right. But some are known for being more litigious than others, and so
right,
if somebody doesn't look like they did on TV or in a movie, it may be that.
right,
But the people
and
complaining about it probably don't understand that.
yeah, yeah, and they also hold dear the knowledge that they have, and it gives them a sense of belonging and power that,
That's it.
um, and yep, God bless them because through their complaints, sometimes things get better and things change, but you also
Yeah.
have to like take it with a grain of salt because, like, man, there's been thousands of issues of these comics with hundreds of appearances by these characters. They're
Yeah.
gonna change depending on the
We've
artists
passed the
and the
1,000
time.
issue mark at this point. And
Yeah, well, I know IDW has just 500 to themselves.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, at this point, it's around 1,100. I actually I have to update my index because I haven't done it in the last 3 months. But
Hmm.
we're somewhere in the area of the 1,100 mark at this point of issues that have either come out or been announced, and 500 of them are from IDW, which only entered the arena in 2007. So it's extraordinary how what their output has been.
Right. And those are like unique issues, right? Like new story issues or
Yeah,
new
yeah. I don't mean
comics. Yeah.
variants. If you take variant covers into account, there's enough issues to wallpaper a stadium.
Right. Yeah.
I mean unique issues, and from so Star Trek Gold Key #1, just that, no reprints of it. I just mean just
Hmm.
unique issues. It's around somewhere in the 1,100 range, from 67 to present.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was fooled, but I bought a couple comics that were reprints that I didn't realize were reprints of
Hmm.
the Gold Keys. That because after
Let
Gold
me
Key
guess,
published theirs,
Dynabrite.
exactly. I got
Yeah.
two of them. I paid like $10 for both of them, and
You
they
know
were
how I
in
knew
pretty
that?
good.
I'll tell you how I knew that.
I do
Back
know
in
that.
Well, I started collecting. First of all, either I'm psychic, but I'm not, or I started collecting in the '80s as a teenager. Is how I got into Star Trek, and I went back and it was the DC line. Issue #9 came out. That was the first
Hmm.
one I ever got, but loved it. Went back and found the first 8, then went back and found Marvel, and I thought I had them all because it was 1984. It wasn't like there was an internet, and because I hadn't been reading them, I didn't know the Gold Key line even existed. And then at that point, the Gold Key issues were going for extraordinary amounts of money because this was pre-internet. People thought they were a lot rarer than they are.
Hmm.
And so you can go on eBay now and find issues for, especially the later ones. relatively low prices back then. Back in the 80s, people were spending $900 for issue one. It was insane.
Good
And
grief.
yeah, but there was this mistaken belief that these things were astoundingly rare. But I found out this comic line existed. I saw a couple of really weird covers, and I said, "Well, I'm gonna find them." So I went to a convention, and in a one of those like because it was the '80s, so these boxes existed still. 4 for $1 boxes. Nobody does that anymore. But I found one, and I was like, "Oh, look, a Gold Key Star Trek," and I took it home, and I was like, "This is weird. It's got this cardboard cover, and there's 2 stories in it. What is this?" And that's that. And then I did some research, and that's when I discovered, oh, the first Gold Key issue I bought was actually a Dynabrite reprint, and that's how, as soon as you said a weird reprint, like he did the same thing I did.
Yeah, now I do have about a third of the Gold Key issues so far, and I've looked at
Right
I've
there.
looked at eBay on them a few times, and yeah, they're like if you want a number one like CGC graded, they're going for about $1,200, $1,500.
Yeah, I'm a one of each issue guy. Like, see, I don't care about them being graded. For one thing, I want to read them. I'll never own a
Hmm.
CGC graded issue because I want to read it.
Right.
I, for people who collect them, more power to you. But like keeping them in a case unable to open doesn't make a lot of sense to me as a reader. As a
Right.
collector, maybe it works for some people, but for me, none of mine are all reader quality, and that's how I like it. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
you get a lot
gone.
cheaper that way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I only splurged on a CGC graded one for my Rocketeer first appearance
Mm.
because I had 5 other copies of it, and I was like, you know
Oh, well,
what?
there you go.
I want a nice one I can display somewhere. It's not super expensive. I think I paid maybe $100 for the whole
Oh,
thing.
okay, there you go.
And they got that nice front and back. It looks nice and glossy.
Mhm.
I got it up on a shelf, but just like Funko Pops, like once you have one, they start to just like other ones show up.
Yeah.
And I don't gamble other than doing my local comic shop when they go to shows, they do blind boxes, and I keep getting like CGC graded books in the blind boxes, which they work out okay. Is that the number one
No, I was gonna. Yeah, this
Funko?
is the only Funko Pop I own.
Yep,
I
it's
had
a good
to.
one. Yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was gonna wait till you were done talking, but
yeah,
the fact that they actually did a Funko Pop of Gold Key, I was just blown away by that concept.
right.
It's not something I ever thought I'd see, a Funko Pop of a Star Trek comic and a Gold Key, and a really bad Gold Key one at that. So I was like, I kind of need to own this. And I showed this to my wife, who's amazing, and she ordered it for me. So there you go. But it's the only one I own.
Ah, that's great. Yeah, I unfortunately I've tried to stay as far away from them as possible, but I buy like eBay or Goodwill lots, and they get put in there, and then sometimes you're like, okay, well, if I have one or two, maybe I could buy another one and have the set of those, and that's how I ended up with about 20 of them in my house now.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 2 of them at work because uh they're actually not very good as display models. Like you can't take them out of the boxes without them falling over really, really hard. But I've got Tendy and Badgie sitting on my desk
Uh,
at work
if
because
I
yeah,
were
I
going to
want
have them, I might even actually go for Badgie. I'm
yeah.
more likely to do stuff like this because
And
this
what
has
is
a
it?
so this is a very very hard to find Star Trek rack toy from 1979.
Hmm.
Called the Star Trek Space Viewer. It was from a company called Laramie, which was known for making the crappiest, most breakable toys in history. And kids got them for a dime or a quarter and said
Hmm.
yay, and then broke them immediately. So most of them were thrown out, and so
Right.
finding these are hard. For me, those are 2 original comic strips. They don't appear in any comic book. So when I found out about it, I said, kind of have to get this. And then I bought them, read the comic strips, and they're just so bad that they make the Star Trek video communicator strips look good. So this is like when I buy. I'm not much of a toy collector, but this is the kind of stuff I'm more likely to get because
Yeah.
there are comic strips. Like for example, Laramie also did, and these were even harder to find. 2 Battlestar Galactica rack toys that also had comic strips in them,
Okay.
and uh, One was the space viewer. The other is so rare. It's called the Star Trek Wrist Viewer, and it is so rare that I couldn't even confirm its existence for like a couple years. Nobody online even mentioned it, and that's
Hmm.
rare in the
Yeah.
2020s. So I was like, maybe it doesn't exist, and then one day by accident I found this, and but like I don't care about the toy. It's because I'm a completist, and there are
Right.
comics in here that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And
Yeah.
then I
That's that.
finally read all these, and I was like, these are the worst stories I've ever read. Why did I do? Why universe?
For
Why?
what
Why did I?
price?
What was I doing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the those are like edge cases of like your specific razor thin aspect of the fandom. Like those are so
yeah.
cool because
Oh
like
yeah,
I've
that's
talked
what they're
to
all displayed on my shelf because they are really cool, but I like they're horrible.
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah,
One of
my
the
wife.
Battlestar Galactica ones looks like a person consumed about 8 tabs of acid before drawing it. Like the face is like if you took Picasso and like 16 cans of paint and just threw the paint on a Picasso, you'd have how this Battlestar Galactica strip is drawn. It's just I don't even know what happened.
I mean, if they're doing toys to the lowest bidder, it's
That's
probably someone's like 4-year-old kid that drew the comics.
they might have done better. A 4 year
Yeah.
old. Yeah.
Yeah, my white whale right now is currently the three variant. Well, there was a total of five variants, but there's a Star Trek like a 12-inch action figure was sold with a book that was biographies of Starfleet captains. It was called
Mhm.
Ships to Steer Her By. It was the
Right.
Star Trek Masterclass series, and I've only ever been able to find the actual releases for Kirk and Picard.
Mm.
Uh, but there's solicitations that I found for a Pike and Cisco, uh, and maybe a Janeway, but the Pike and Cisco ones are the ones that I've seen solicitations for.
Have you ever confirmed that they were actually released?
So I emailed a guy that did the art because Mark posted something, I believe, on the Facebook group about some artwork that was done by someone that was used in multiple places, and he mentioned one of them was used for the Master Series. And I
Oh.
was like, "Well, hot diggity dang, that's a lead." So I emailed him, and he said he couldn't remember anything about it. And
Mm.
I asked him, like, "Hey, is there anyone still at that company, or could you like, kick me down the path?" And he said he didn't remember anyone from the company, and no one that he worked with would still be there. But I was at Shore Leave back in July, and the book was written by Michael Jan Friedman. So I asked him, and he said
Mm.
he remembers seeing those books. But does that mean they were ever sold? I don't know.
So did Mike own one? I mean, as the author, was he ever given
No,
one?
he said he had a copy of the Kirk book, but he didn't have because they're it's like a book about this size, then a doll about that size, and then the whole thing is like this thick. Trying to see if I actually have them on background, and I don't.
It's a
So
shame that they
it's
didn't give him a comp. You should. I'm a firm believer that any publisher should give the writer and the artist a complimentary copy.
I
Without
mean
them,
at
it wouldn't
least
be
one
special.
copy, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Preferably more, but at least one. If you writing a book is not a quick thing, so if somebody
Hmm.
writes a book, they should receive a copy. I'm sorry to hear he doesn't have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he said he remembers seeing a copy, and so now every year at Shore Leave, it's on my reminder list to ask him if he's found one yet. Because he's a great guy. He was very friendly about it. He was very happy to talk
Michael
about the
J.
book.
Friedman is a really nice guy.
Yeah, he
Really,
is.
yeah.
But it was one of the first biography, like in-world biography books, which was cool to talk to him about that book because Derek Tyler Attica was at that same show.
Mm.
And of course, the
Yeah.
autobiography of Benjamin Sisko had just come out, and I
Yeah.
had talked to him before the show. So it's like cool to see the different methods of doing it. Where Mike's version was it was much shorter, and it was for like four or five different captains at the same time.
Yeah. His
But
books about Picard are must reads. His Picard, Mike's novels about from years ago about
right,
like Stargazer crew and so forth. They're great.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic books. I love reading all of them. Pretty sure I have most of them in my collection at this point. My problem though is that like my office is set up in a way that the camera doesn't really see anything other than like the pile of incoming to be sorted stuff that's behind me, because that's those are long boxes that are about 5 feet tall back there.
Time to
And
change your layout.
I've actually
Put your
been like
bed shelf
sketching
right
stuff out,
behind you.
right?
Yeah.
Because I've talked to a few of the authors have like their brag walls or just like all the Star Trek books that they've ever worked on. And some of these guys have done like editing for, like Keith DiCandido, like he's edited like hundreds of books. So,
Yeah.
his wall's massive. And then
Your shelf becomes huge at that point. My
right.
brag shelf is upstairs. I've been toying with the idea of bringing it down here to my office because
Hmm.
it's kind of fun to have it on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, the Eaglemoss books are behind me, but they're below the camera, so that doesn't help in the slightest.
Right. Yeah, I honestly, what attracted me to that series was the like it's not a triptych because it's more than just three, but like that just mosaic that goes across all the books. Like that's just so gorgeous. And I've got like I said, the first like 40 or
I'll
so
see if I can
issues.
position this so you can see so your
Yeah,
viewers
yeah, there's the
can
start of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
see. I'm in the shot, aren't I? Wait,
Yeah, a
there
little
we go.
bit. Yeah, the
You
struggle that
can
I've
see.
always seen with
There we
people
go. You can see
versus
some
the
of it.
collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just so great. Do you know if it's the same artist that's across all those spines?
To my knowledge, what it is, if I recall correctly, it's pieces of pulled out of. I seem to recall that it was ships pulled out of the various comics.
Okay.
But I see that wasn't so. I worked with the graphic artist, the art designer, and the graphic artist. But the art team chose those, and did they? Wait a minute. It's been a few years. Unfortunately, it's been a few years now. Oh no, you know what? No, that's the no. I'm mistaken. What I was just describing is actually the artwork on the inside covers. No, the one on the outside is actually, yeah, it is one artist, isn't it? I think it might be.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Only because it works so well, and like you can
it really
clearly
does.
see that there was a couple like decisions made on like art. We do the art up to this point, I guess, like whatever they're authorized to print, and then Eagle Moss like got that extension to do another number of issues, and
So
then
so the way it worked, I don't know how it was in the beginning because in the beginning I was just one of the guys who wrote intros. I was not the editor until 72. But the way it worked in the beginning is they had a certain number of books that they were contracted for, and then that did well, and they were given a 20 book extension and another 20 and so forth. And then the editor stepped down, and because I and Bob Greenberger had been writing most of the introductions since the beginning, and they knew that I have that behind me, which
Mhm.
meant that any issues that they couldn't get access to for reprinting, I could actually provide them. And so they asked if I wanted to take over as editor, and I said that'd be great. And I started in 20 book increments, working out what would be next, starting with issue 80 because they'd already worked out 60 to 80, and that was what I was finishing up when I stepped in. But from 80 to 140 was me mapping out the roadmap to finish everything because our goal was to finish everything. And the frustrating thing, we only needed one more. I had at the point that we were canceled, I had worked out a way to get absolutely everything that had not been reprinted yet into the final 20 into a final 20 issue set. And I
Mhm.
pleaded with them. I said, look, just okay the 20 because then everything is done. And then if you're going to cancel it, that's fine because now every few years come out with another couple of volumes based on what IDW puts out. But in the meantime, just get the last 20 out because then fans will be able to say they have everything from
Right.
1967 to what was it, 2020, 2021? I'm trying to think of when the last one came out. Whatever it was, that they would then have everything.
Hmm.
But that last 20 book set of books was canceled. It kills me because a large chunk of DC was left out,
Right. And now
which for a
was
lot
that
of people was the gold run. Like
right?
that final 20 book set was going to be filled with DC. It would have been amazing. Yeah, it kills
Now,
me.
would that have been catching up where they accidentally like flipped which series they were releasing early in the run, or was that already
Oh, that was
released?
taken care of pretty
Okay.
quickly after I started. What had happened was, yeah. So there was one volume. It happened in one book and I don't remember what the issues were, but it was the middle. They suddenly published a set of 6 issues from the wrong DC run, and it was so, but they hadn't done the ones before that because they were so it was really it was a so I came in, and one of the first things I think it might have been the first set that I worked out the roadmap for, I believe, um, was designed to get us to fill in everything that took place before that, because
Uh-huh.
otherwise readers were just going to get 6 issues in the middle of a run that wasn't reprinted. So I managed, by the time we were canceled, to finish the original set of DC, and then I got us up to the point in the second set at which those anomalous issues appeared. So
Mm.
even though they're not published in the correct order, it's all there. But it's
Right.
it's after that point that we lost. And I'd have to take a look at the list. We might have completed the next generation. I'm not sure. I know that the majority of what was left was the second run from Howard Weinstein and those who followed him. Where unfortunately, the majority of those were not reprinted, but had we gotten 141 to 160, they all would have been.
Right. Yeah. One of my more favorite posts on your own website was the what if dream of like what were we going to print in these books?
Yeah, that's on my
That
blog now. Yeah, I have that.
yeah.
I have that posted because I knew that I worried once that was canceled. I was like, is Eaglemoss going to go out of business? If so, what happens to all my work? Because I wrote a lot for them, and luckily I'm anal. I keep everything, so I had the versions of everything, and I slowly started taking the stuff stuff that wasn't like things that were like newsworthy at a
Hmm.
certain time, like celebrating HR Geiger's birthday. There was no point in my throwing it up there years after the fact. But anything Star Trek related from the site, I threw up onto. I didn't throw up, but yeah, I posted. I posted on my blog for posterity, and one of them was the list of what would have been,
Yeah.
because I figured I would let fans see this is the set you didn't get for any, because I
Right.
know there are some people out there who are making custom sets, and I was like, well, people are making custom sets of what didn't come out, and if they want to actually follow the roadmap and get it right, here's what it would have been.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
That was
like
on that.
if we had ever, oh, I'm sorry, please continue.
No, I was gonna say that was actually on my list because I saw someone selling like a complete set and then they had like custom books, but they were already sold. And I was like,
I think his name
custom
is
books.
Jason, right? I forget his last name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really bad at tracking like people just by name on the internet.
Was he
Uh,
selling? I think what he was doing was posting the was he actually selling the books? Because that would have got him in trouble. I think he was posting the covers, wasn't he?
I know at
Maybe
one
I'm wrong.
like the problem with Facebook is that if you don't go explicitly to a group,
I know.
that like it's just all one
It's hard
like
to
just
find
like
it.
blur, and all my feed is like Star Trek authors, people that like Star Trek, and since Facebook knows they're all connected, like a whole lot of Space 1999, Planet of the Apes, Battlestar Galactica,
Right, right.
Stargate, all that jazz, which I'm not going to complain about because I used to have an uncurated feed, and like the recommended stuff for that was just like off the walls. So, but yeah, at one point I saw someone that was selling, and they had already like gotten rid of their the custom stuff, which that's like that makes me jealous. Like people having these custom books that fit in with it, like that's cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure his name was Jason. I wish I could remember his last name, but I was watching the covers that he was posting, and they were pretty good.
Yeah.
Like we would have done them a little differently at Eagle Moss, but they were pretty close to the kinds of things we would have done.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, so like I was like that, not bad, not bad. For
Yeah,
as fan creation goes, some fan creations are, as we know, the quality can be all over the place. Some of them not
yes,
so
they
great.
can. But
These were like a nice
even
homage.
yeah,
Yeah,
even the licensed stuff at times can be hit or miss on like what's going on here, like.
yeah,
But that's nature of the beast,
yeah,
because sometimes you have a dedeline and you need to get it to the printer tomorrow. So like, what are
yeah.
you going to do?
So that happened. So a little backstory on the Eaglemoss thing. I at the point when I came in, and I guess I guess there were some reputational issues going on because the under the previous tenure, there some of the books had some problems, missing pages in the wrong order, the thing you mentioned with entirely the wrong issues being included, and
Hmm.
so forth. And so my goal was to fix that. I was like, if I'm going to be the editor, I want. I'm a fan first. I was a fan long before I was ever a professional writer and editor, and I was like, I've been reading Trek comics since the '80s, and I'm suddenly being allowed to put my mark on one branch of it. And if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. So I want these Eaglemoss books to be well received for my own sake, but also for the fans. Because like
Hmm.
this, if I can fix this, great. So I started editing at 72. 75 came along. I uh, I approved the final PDF with the art director. Everything looked great. And Eaglemoss sent the wrong files to the printer, and so
Oh,
the book came out, and just keep in mind, I'd only been the editor for 3 months, and
uh-huh.
people were talking about maybe Rich is going to fix things, and I come in 3 issues into my run. A book comes out with printer marks in the margins and pages that are tilted, and it was like, but the PDF I had on my computer, because I hadn't received the book yet, the PDF I had was perfect. And I was very confused about this. I'm seeing people on
Hmm.
Facebook going, "Yeah, I give up on it. Nothing's changed." And I'm like, "Wait, whoa, 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 whoa! What just happened? What's going on?" Like,
Right.
and I'm like, "I know for a fact that what you're saying is not true. The final signed off PDF had none of what you're describing." But then people started posting pictures, and I was like, "Well, damn." So yeah, sometimes when people rush, mistakes happen, and I think that that's what happened. I'll never know specifically what happened. I am relieved though that from 72 to 140, as far as I know, that was the only issue of my tenure that was screwed up, and I did convince them to re-release it, and they weren't going to. I probably shouldn't say that, but I just because I wanted people to be happy. If you pay money for a book and it's all screwed up, you should get either a refund or a new book. So I
Hmm.
got them to re-release it. So 75 came out with the proper version, and I don't remember if they just sent it to people or if they submitted their old version to get the new one. I don't really recall.
Right.
Um, I think
So
I
what you're
have the old.
saying,
I have the
so
wrong version on my
yeah,
shelf.
what you're saying is that there's a variant out there that is the publisher's edition
Yeah,
that is
basically.
now worth 10 times what the final release.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were probably both mass produced because they had to replace all of them.
Oh
But yes,
goodness.
there's 2 versions, and one is a misprint. Like I said,
Yeah,
I think
well,
I have the misprint on my shelves, and it kind of amuses me. But like at the same time, I'm like, I hate that happened. If it had happened 50 issues into my tenure, I'd be like, c'est la vie. But like right after I came in, and I was like,
right.
guys, come on, man.
All this nice hope out there, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I had to earn back the goodwill after that, which I hope
Yeah,
I think I did.
and
Yeah,
I mean, fans can be exacting and demanding, but
yeah.
I'd like to think that most of them understand that at the end of the day, it's people doing this stuff.
Well, on the there's a Facebook group for the graphic novel collection, and this is where that happened, where the pages were posted, and the people there are really nice, very friendly people, and while the books were coming out, I was a pretty active person there, and one thing I found is that the fans are very forgiving if you just communicate with them, because
Mhm.
not all fans. There are a couple of people who you could do 106 things right, and the 107th has the word "the" spelled TEH, and these people will act like you just shot their grandparents. But that's true for any fandom. That's just the nature of people. There are some unhinged members of this worldwide population. But the truth is, the majority of people who read the graphic novel collection that I interacted with were really nice, and because I communicated with them and said, "Look, I don't know what happened. Here's a page from the PDF that I approved and I signed off on, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this." They were very understanding. They were like, "Well, thank you. That's actually nice to see." So hopefully that got me back some goodwill. But I was embarrassed because anyone who was not in that group, it was
Yeah.
on
What
me,
do they
even
know?
though I had
Yeah.
nothing to do with it. But I think every editor, every writer probably has a story like that. Where I have an amusing one from very early in my career. The very first piece of fiction that I published was a Star Wars short story, which Charlene Newcomb and I wrote for West End Games Star Wars Adventure Journal. And that was oh, God, what was this? This was late 90s. Yeah, so this would have been like maybe like 94, 95, mid 90s. Um, and So we had a character named Crimson Darasha, but her nickname was Red. And at one point, a guy gets shot, and he's saying, "I'm not going to make it, Red." And he looks down, and he's got blood all over his shirt, and he jokes, "I guess I am going to make it red, but lowercase r."
Hmm.
And just because he's a wise ass, and this is Star Wars where jokes are always corny. So we threw this cornball joke, and I guess I am going to make it red. And then he coughs up some more blood to make it more red. And our editor, not getting the joke, changed it to uppercase red.
Oh,
So when the book came out, we're like, "I'm not going to make it red." Blah. Looks like I am going to make it red, which just throws logic out the window. Like, I didn't think I was going to die until I started bleeding out all my orifices. Now I'm good. I'll be fine. Which is not at all what we were saying. Which was just it was him going, "Yeah, I made everything red, didn't I?" But then we got the published book, and we were like, oh, because for the next several decades, anyone who reads this is going to go, "I don't get the joke. What were Rich Handley and Charlene Newcomb talking about?" Like, I don't understand. Why does he think he's going to live now? And the story was never reprinted, so it's never been corrected.
I've actually seen author proofs of like when they send it off to like be finalized and actually like drawn out and everything, where
Mm-hmm.
they scribble out a thing that says like the joke is XYZ,
Yeah,
like in your author margins.
we didn't get a
And
proof.
right. Well, I'm always like I'm like, do they have to explain every joke? But I think that there's
That's why.
yeah,
Because I
that's
thought
why.
our joke was pretty obvious what we were doing. It was purposely him being corny in the moment of dying and joking about the fact that he just bled everywhere. But for whatever reason, our editor thought, "Oh no, no, well, her name is Red. Obviously, that should be capitalized."
Uh,
So yeah, so if you see printer probably author comments on the proofs pointing out, "No, the chicken really is not crossing the road." That's the reason why, because they're
right.
probably afraid the editor is going to change it.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, communication is key, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
fans or editors, the more you communicate. My day job is project management, and there's so much like I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Here it
Yeah.
is. I'm telling it to you. Now that I've told you that, here's what I told you.
Here's what I
Now
just told
tell
you.
me. And
Yeah.
then now you please tell me what you heard when I said that. And half the time you get exactly what you were hoping to impart, but the other time it's a conversation where you have to like get everyone's brains heading in the right direction.
There's a reason the game telephone is so universally known,
Hmm.
and there's a reason why. You know, you've seen the movie Johnny Dangerously, I assume,
With
with
no,
Michael
I'm
Keaton.
thinking no, I don't think I have seen that one.
First of all, you must see that. It's one of his
Okay.
funniest movies. But there's a point in which one of the funnier gags in the film is that Johnny goes to prison and he's sitting there and there's a long line of people and someone's trying to get a message to Johnny. So he gives a message to one guy who then turns to the next guy, who turns to the next guy. And by the time it gets to the last guy before Johnny, like the first guy says something like, Roman Moroni is going to bump off Johnny's brother, the DA, today. And by the time it gets to the end, it's something like Johnny and the Mothers are playing it's like it's a totally different message. And then
Hmm.
and then Johnny goes, Roman Moroni's going to bump off my brother, the DA, today. He goes, that's not what I said. He goes, yeah, but I know how this telephone game works.
Right. You work it backwards, try
Yeah,
to find the origin of it. Right.
but like the reason that joke was so funny at the time is because everyone knows how
Hmm.
communication falls apart, no matter how hard you try not to let it. And
Right.
I think every editor and writer has seen that. It's just it's par for the course.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that you did a fair bit of work. You said for communicator. That was your
Mhm.
first Trek work.
Yeah.
One of my future side projects, one of the 50 of them that I have for my own site, is to eventually go through all the magazines that I've gotten and do the table of contents, who the authors were, and actually get the authors in there, the interviewers, the
Oh, that's cool.
interviewees, like all that jazz. Like
There's a lot.
we're talking like 2030 is when this
Yeah.
kind of thing is going to get released. But that was another collection because like when I started this game, it was gonna be books only, like just printed books, no comic books, no magazines, no records, no lobby cards, like none of that jazz. But like I said, I buy lots at times, and all this other stuff comes with it. And one time I got like a heck of a deal on like it was like a dozen hardcover books, and they were like the book club editions that they used to do, and then it also came with like 50 communicator and the big thick ones. What were they called?
Star Trek magazine.
Yeah, Star Trek the magazines.
Yeah.
uh which these are fantastic
Mhm.
because they come with most of them come with like a Star Trek centerfold,
Yeah.
which is like, it's like here's like the
Yeah. For the
corner
ship fans,
office.
those were great. There was a lot of
Yeah.
ships and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the wardroom in Deep Space Nine in this
Yeah.
one. And this one, like, it splits out to a 4-page thing. I'm not going to
I
figure
used to
that
have
out
a
right
ton
now.
of those. Actually, I still have a ton of them, but they're in storage. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but like that's my big project. But it's cool to see how many people came in through magazine work, either doing quick interviews or just writing a blurb or something like that, and then move on to like editing or design arrangement for the books and the comics.
It's probably pretty common. It's magazine work is I mean, back in the day, these days there aren't as many magazines as there were, but there used to be a ton of them. And so, if you
Hmm.
wanted to get your foot in the door, magazine work was a great way to do it. It's easier to sell a magazine article than to sell a book, for one thing.
Right.
And when you sell a magazine article, if you're a nice person who turns in quality work on time, it's pretty clean. You'll usually be asked to write more. And because
Right.
you start doing that, you meet people who will help you get other stuff done.
Hmm.
I back in '99 when I joined the communicator team, I was already writing for Star Wars Insider, and that was published by Dan Madsen. And so I was a Star Wars fan. I was already working for the Star Wars franchise, but my main love was Star Trek. And so I was like, what the heck? I'm going to pitch something because Dan Madsen also published the Communicator, which was edited by Larry Nemechek. And at the time, I had been in the process of putting together a complete set of the Star Trek newspaper strips from the LA Times Syndicate and from the UK magazines. And to my knowledge at the time, and still to this day, I've yet to meet anyone who has all of it. It's
I,
just so incredibly hard to find.
yeah.
1,400 daily daily and Sunday comic strips, and 259 British magazines and hardcovers, 265. And so, I managed in the wee days of the early net to the early net. What did I really just say? Early net, the wee days of the internet, or early net, as I've just recoined it.
Right.
Yeah, that's why say it every day; it'll catch on. But in the wee days of the internet, despite being in the United States, not the United Kingdom, I somehow managed to come up with all these, and I was determined they were going to get reprinted, or I was going to, hand in my geek card. But I had to do it. And I said the first step is I want to make sure people know these things exist, because every time I would write to people and ask them about it, no one knew about it. I reached out to Majel Barrett Roddenberry. She didn't know these things existed. She was one of the people running Lincoln Enterprises, which was in charge of merchandising, and she didn't know they existed. That's how off the grid they were, even though they were licensed. And so I reached out to Larry and said, "Would you be interested in an article on the Star Trek newspaper strips? And basically his answer can be summed up as hell yes.
Mhm.
And so that appeared in 1999, and then Larry and I hit it off, and I kept writing for him, and I was with him until the end of that magazine. And then over the years, because of that, like with what you were just saying about how you come in and then it becomes other things, um, I did work for GIT Corp on the helping them put together the DVD ROMs or CD ROMs or DVD ROMs, I forget which, of the Star Trek comics, and Star Trek magazine, and then over the years, I kept pushing to get the strips reprinted. So I went to Wildstorm, and I went to Pocket, and in each case, Wildstorm and Pocket Books both wanted to do it, but there were lawyer issues that they could not get the permission to do it. And I kept pushing. I was like, someday. And one day I was like, a decade and a half had passed. I'm like, I'm going to take one more shot at this. I'm done after this. So I reached out to IDW, and I heard back from Chris Ryall that same day, because weirdly enough, Chris Ryall had heard about these strips and wanted to reprint them. And the one thing he didn't have were the strips.
Right.
He's like, I know these exist. I'd love to reprint them. I have no idea how to get them. While he's in the midst of doing this, Joe Nobody reaches out to him and says, "Hey, I've got it all. Interested in reprinting?" And he was like, "Yeah." So yeah, exactly. And they didn't run into the same lawyer problems. Like they were able to do it. And next thing I knew, I worked with IDW to create these 5 books that reprinted these strips in their entirety. And we even included. It was cool. I put these in. These strips are in those books just
Right.
because, like, the odds are most fans will never own this, right? So I'm putting those in, and we put this in, like they're in there as well,
Right.
And then it just sort of went from there. Like so that's how it starts. You get one gig with franchise work, and if you're well liked, and if you're nice to people, you'll get more, and it just sort of grows if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the Star Wars work dried up for me years ago. So it ends eventually too. Actually, the last Star Wars work I did was also the same the IDW team, because after we finished those 5 books, I worked with them to reprint the Star Wars newspaper strips. And as far as I'm concerned, if I never do more Star Wars, that I'm very proud to have that be my last one, because
Right.
I'm a major fan of the Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson strips, and the fact that I worked on those books, that can be my last thing for Star Wars. I'm cool.
Was there a subtitle for the Star Trek reprints?
Well, there are. Yeah, I'll show you. They happen to be right here as it happens. So there was a 2-book set called. This was a hardcover set from IDW's Library of American Comics. It's called Star Trek: The Newspaper Comics. These books are gorgeous. They really are. They're also big enough to kill somebody with. But the reprint quality was just beautiful. And I wrote all the supplementary materials for these books, and I was the assistant editor. And then because those sold well, I convinced them to do the thing I really wanted to do from the beginning, which was Star Trek: The Classic UK Comics, because these are impossible to find. But I had them. So we gave these the same treatment, and there are 3 of these, 2 for the US series, so 5 total. And those were fun. So funny little tidbit for you: when I first started working on the Eaglemoss books, what my role was is that the editor would write to me and say, "Here's some upcoming editions. Would you be interested in writing an introduction for volume 23 about blah blah blah, volume 28 about blah blah blah?" And one day I got this email from the previous editor that said, "Hey, have you ever read the Star Trek newspaper strips? Because we're going to reprint the US books." And I just sort of chuckled. I was like, what were the odds? I said, well, as it happens, the books you're reprinting are actually scanned from my private collection. So yes, I do know them. So I ended up writing the introductions to those books too. So like, just because they happened to be handed to me, not to Bob Greenberger, I ended up writing the introductions to these twice, which is not something I was expecting to do, but that was fun.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you put it out there and it just keeps coming back to you.
Well, that's the thing. I was amused because all the work that Dean Mullaney at IDW and I did to put these books together, the books turned out beautifully. And so because those files were just sent to Eaglemoss, I got they're like, here's what we're going to reprint this volume. And I'm chuckling going, yeah, these guys did no work at all. Like these are, this is what Dean and I put together, but that's okay because it was an authentic reprint. It was a reprint of what we had done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so what was the process of getting the like? Did you scan those locally, or did you ship off your collection and they
Well,
did it with a industrial
so
scanner?
you mean the first time when we did it through
Right.
IDW?
Yeah. When you actually got the
So
scans in.
luckily for fans, IDW has its Library of American Comics imprint, and that company that it LOAC is known for doing very high quality reprints of books. They've reprinted tons of old comic strips, and so they have high resolution printers and art directors who know how to handle old comic strips. And they also know everybody out there who has private collections. Like if they decide we're going to reprint something that's never been seen since 1942, they know somebody who has access to it. And so what Dean did was he arranged for my collection, and I'll tell you, this was stress time for me because I spent so long getting them together. But he arranged to have them transported to him so that he could get them all scanned on his end, and then he got them back to me promptly, surprisingly promptly. I mean, it's a lot of material. And then I put them all back on my shelves and kissed them and said, "Hey, welcome home, guys." And then I
I
worked with
missed you.
Dean. Yeah, it was. I was torn, man, because I was like, I really want fans to be able to see these. I don't want to be the only guy who has a set of these. I want to be the guy who brought these to fans, but I
Right.
also don't want to trust, the UPS or FedEx. Like this is scary. But because if FedEx lost them, I'd be insured, but I would not have them, and it
Right.
took years to find them. Right. So, but once Dean had it, what the process was that we worked out what I was going to write for each of these 5 books, and I got started on that. He and his team got started on layouts and cleanup because the idea was to make them look as good as they could. And in some cases, he would come across like for me, if it was in my collection, I was just happy to have that strip. But sometimes
Hmm.
these strips were, I mean, not sometimes these strips were 4 decades old. And so sometimes the quality was not great. They're talking about cutouts from newspapers. And so Dean was like, this one strip's a little difficult. I'm going to reach out to everybody I know. And so Dean managed to find the best copy he could find of every day. So
Right.
whatever I had, he was like, now I know we have everything. But which of these 1,400, here's 800 that I'd like to find better copies of. And so he spent time doing that. I didn't know he was doing that. So I was amazed when he sent me the scans because I was like, this is so much better than what I sent you to. How did you do that? And then the process after that was that I went through and checked and made sure everything was there. I went through my
Uh-huh.
collection and went that. And to his credit, because Dean's a consummate professional, nothing was missing, which is amazing. And then we just basically um, then we decided what extras would be in there. And so anything that I could think of that was comic strip related went into the book. And that was when I was glad that I found that I had stupidly tracked down things like this because suddenly there was a purpose. Because if I have to suffer through reading this, everybody does. Yeah. So that was the process on those, and that was a very fun project. It's something I was sad when it ended.
Right.
Dean and I got along great, and I just really liked making those books. So when he said, "You," oh, at the end, he's like, "Do you also like Star Wars?" And I'm like, "Well, actually." So then we did 3 more books together, and then not long thereafter, Dean retired. I was disappointed because he deserved it, but I enjoyed working with him. So
Right. Yeah, it's always a bittersweet moment when you finish your collection, you finish the
yeah,
thing you're doing, like the guy you were working with on the thing isn't in the industry anymore.
yeah,
Um but it's it makes room for the next generation of both people coming in and oh, what am I trying to say? The
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 next
next
job.
project for you to work on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I think what
exactly.
you just said is basically describes what it's like being a writer, what it's like
Hmm.
being a fan. And if you are both a fan and a writer, it happens to you a lot. Everything that's on my shelves at one point had gaps. At this point, the collections that I have are now complete, and I miss the hunt. I was actually talking to my wife about this not that long ago. Um, I started collecting in the '80s when there was no internet, and you were pretty much limited to the comic shops in your area or wherever you happened to travel. Uh,
Hmm.
you didn't know about comic shops in the middle of Iowa if you never went to Iowa, and they might have everything you were looking for. So the hunt was everything, and the hunt was fun. You'd go and I'm going to look here and I'm going to look here. No, next box. You would spend all this time looking, and you go, I found it, and I don't care that it's $28. I'm buying it because I'll never see it again. Who could have predicted what would happen with the internet?
Hmm.
Now
Right.
you just go in Google and you type in the rarest thing you know about, and I see 15 places selling it. That's the cheapest, and it's great for a collector. But I miss the hunt. I truly
And
do. It was fun.
yeah, and that's a self-imposed limitation that I've put on myself because I spend more than a healthy amount of money just like buying stuff off of eBay and just like various places and I realized that like it wasn't as fun. Like you get it in the mail, you look at it, you read it, you put it in a box and you're done. And I put the stipulation on myself that if I'm going to buy this stuff, I've got to do it in person. So that means I
Mm.
have to go to the conventions. I have to go to comic shops that are, like you said, in Illinois or in my case, when I went up to Shore Leave, that was in Lancaster in Pennsylvania. Like going to the show, I hit all those stores that I could going that way. And then coming back, I went to all the stores that were in
Mm.
Philadelphia. And that
Smart.
was a trip because it was just like a day long. Like I've got to get to the airport by like four in the afternoon, and I started it at like 9 in the morning, just
Mm.
hitting every comic shop I could on the way there. And I ended up getting probably about 60 ish Trek books,
Oh, that's great.
like yeah, 5 or 6 gold keys that half of which I already had because I was misreading my list. But that's okay. Those I'm
Oh,
okay
I
with
hate when
having
they do that.
duplicates with. Yeah.
Then you can always
Yeah.
resell them. But I've done
Yeah.
that
Well,
too.
and odds are good that like one of the two of them is going to be in a better condition than the other one because those guys get beat up so bad for a few reasons. They're so old, but also they used to put coupons in them that you had to like cut out and mail
Yeah.
away.
And sometimes
And
you'll find the pages are missing. Yeah.
yep. Or someone's like drawing mustaches on everyone, which we had a convention here in town 2 or 3 years ago, and a guy was selling. He had about 10 gold key issues. He was selling for like $2 each
Oh, wow.
because someone had gone through and done the mustaches, and someone had cut out all the stuff. And I was telling him, like I don't have these books in my collection, so just having them for this
Right.
price is
They're
fantastic. And
placeholders until you find a good one.
right. And two, like those are loved books. Like someone had that book and then like cut out the coupon, held on to it for that long. And then he says to me, "Well, these are my books from when I was a kid."
Oh,
And
that's
like,
even nicer.
yeah, I think I like made his day that day. I actually got his name and his business card, and I put it on the back of the comic bag and board. So I was like, "This is cool, man." Like
You know,
these books aren't like worth anything to like
but there's a
the
meaning behind
marketplace.
them. They
Yeah,
represent
exactly.
love. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, the gold key issues that I found over time mostly were in good condition, but there's one in particular, and I smile when I leaf through them. And like you said, I'm careful now because they're older. But apparently, whoever this person was that owned it back in the late 60s or early 70s, I guess it would have been early 70s given what issue it is, really liked yellow highlighters because everybody's face is neon yellow.
Ah,
Everybody's face, and it's not even like done by a competent artist. It was clearly a young child, and so they're all colored in, but like that.
right.
I'm not entirely why, like, but like it's like this kid said, I really like this comic, but Scotty's not neon yellow enough. Neither is Kirk. that monster needs to be neon yellow. So so it made me laugh when I leafed through it. I got it in like a quarter box, and I'm like, I'm going to keep this. Everybody is
Yeah,
neon yellow. It's it's the rare neon yellow variant edition,
right.
and
Some
I
avant-garde
have the
version of
only
Trek.
copy of
Yeah.
it. But
So
yeah.
so you've got correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a book coming out soon that you edited, or did it already come out?
Which book do
It's
you mean?
I'm specifically thinking of I think it's called Women Take the Con.
Oh,
Was
that came
was
out.
that
That came out
okay?
earlier this year. Yeah.
And I think I have an issue of it, or not an issue, but I think I have a copy of it now that I say that. I think I picked it up at Shore Leave
Oh,
because one of the authors that was there, I think, is in it. Kelly Fitzpatrick, did she write a thing for that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Kelly
Okay.
is a frequent collaborator of mine. She's
Yes.
awesome,
Yes.
and she's contributed to a bunch of my essay anthologies. Yeah,
Yeah. So I've got a copy
I
of
was
that with
very
her
proud of
signature
Women
on it.
Take the Con. I hope that you like it when you read it. I was very proud of that. Summer Brooks and I both were really happy with how those essays came out.
Yeah. Now, what's the conceit behind that one?
So there's a little bit of a backstory. The publisher is Becky Books, which is run
Hmm.
by Jim Beard. Jim is a longtime friend of mine. We've worked together on a bunch of different things, and um, his sadly his wife Becky, his wife, his best friend since they were very young, passed away several years ago from cancer, and she was a total sweetheart, and they had all the same interests, and she was his greatest fan, he was her greatest fan, and so he decided as a very prolific writer and editor that he was going to have an independent book line that was devoted to the things Becky liked, and so he named it Becky Books. And so things like Dark Shadows and Star Trek and so forth, and a couple of other topics. I've contributed to a few of those books. And so he said to me that he would like to do a book, and he wanted me to be the editor. And I was flattered, but there was one problem with it. And I'll tell you what the conceit of the book is, and you'll see immediately what the problem was with my being the editor. So the idea behind the book is 25 women writers offering women perspectives on 25 women characters from the original
Right.
series
As edited by a man.
as edited by a dude. And that is right there a snapshot of everything that is wrong with
Right.
the publishing world. And I am very much not a guy who wants to perpetuate that. And so what I
Right.
said to him was, look, I'm honored because that you thought that I would do justice to Becky's memory. I'm honored that you thought I would do justice to this book. But if this is entirely a book on women's perspectives, then two things are true. One, it should not be solely edited by a guy. And two, I should not write an essay for this
Hmm.
because that's a male's perspective. And as far as editing goes, it's a guy telling women what their perspective are. If I'm the editor, like this seems wrong, but for Becky, I'd like to be involved. So I said we need a co-editor. Needs to be a woman, and I want her to write the afterword because a woman needs to have the final say in this book, not me.
Hmm.
And so I wrote an introduction about Lucille Ball because Lucille Ball is connected to Star Trek's Genesis, not as opposed to Star Trek Genesis, but
Right.
but but I said as far as the perspectives on anything in universe, it shouldn't come from me. This needs to be a book that is solely women talking about women and about women's roles.
Hmm.
And so that was the stipulation. Jim 100% agreed because he had the same concern I did. And so Summer came in and was my co-editor, and um, it worked really well. I also was upfront with the writers and we invited them that, yeah, I get that the optics seems weird that you have a man reaching out to you about a book on women's perspectives only. But here's the situation, and I explained it in the introduction as well, so that readers will understand this is about honoring Becky, and I knew her. So otherwise, I would have said no, because
Right.
I don't want that optic. I don't want to. I don't want to be the reason a book on women's perspectives gets weakened by a male's perspective. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good sized book too. I was trying to see if I could
Yeah.
find my copy, but I don't think I have a copy of it here.
I would grab mine, but
Um,
it's upstairs on the brag shelf, so I can't.
yeah, yeah, that's the problem with having so many books all over the house because like I'm like okay, I've got 500 books that way, I got 500 books this way. I've actually got this week's comic book pickups on the table here, which one of them is the trade paperback for Godshock, which
Right.
is the I want to say the first collection of the
That's the
Trek
first one,
books,
yes.
which
Mhm.
God, that series is just absolutely blowing my mind in every issue.
It is really
Um,
good. I'll admit that I'm behind because I've been busy working on something else, but I soon plan to catch up fully because the thing with what Heather Antos and her writers and artists are doing is this really well conceived multi-show arc that
mhm.
encompasses all of it. I interviewed Heather for Star Trek Explorer for the Titan magazine, and one thing she said to me was, I when I went into this, I asked my writers, what would a book called Star Trek, not Star Trek, The Next Generation, Star Trek this, that, just a book called Star Trek. What exactly is that? And because she wanted the idea that the book wasn't here's a Next Generation story, here's a Deep Space Nine story, but here's the Star Trek universe. And so
Hmm.
these series have characters from throughout, and it blows me away. But because I'm somebody who finds that stories like that are best read in blocks. That's what's caused me to fall behind because I haven't had
Hmm.
time to sit down and read 15 in a row. But it's serialized storytelling across multiple titles, and so I want to take a day where I just say, "Honey, I'll be down here for the next 12
Right,
hours." And then read 60 issues or whatever. I just
right.
haven't had time to do it yet. But what I
Now,
did read of it so far is amazing.
have you caught up to the Day of Blood?
I think I stopped shortly before that, so I haven't read
Okay,
Day of Blood yet.
because
Yeah,
that's where the first like universal like just like here's the galaxy, what's it like there? Like that's that
yeah.
first payoff, and man, it was a heck of a payoff. Like it was such a good story, and
Unfortunately, I was spoiled on some of it, but yeah, don't tell me. But that's what I've
uh,
heard.
there's
My
blood.
my goal is to read all of it, like
Yeah.
in a very short span, because I've read everything before Star Trek and Defiant and Day of Blood. Everything before that, I have read multiple times,
Hmm.
and so I'm in a weird position right now, which is for the first time I haven't read everything that's out. Because of the last, like 2024, I've been very busy on a non Star Trek project, and so I just haven't had time. I was very glad to be in Star Trek 400 though, and I was that was cool, and so I made sure to read that issue immediately.
Yeah, both 400 and 500 did well at setting up like the next domino that was going to fall.
Yeah, yeah.
And like now you have the issues, right? You already have the singles
So
that
I
have been
so
released.
I have a dealer that puts aside one of everything for me,
Hmm.
and then I get it from him. I haven't I'm waiting for the next shipment because he's not local. He's in California.
Right.
And so when the next shipment comes, I'll be caught up. So
Yeah.
whatever the
Yeah.
last 10 issues, I haven't gotten them, which is okay because I'm behind in reading.
Right.
Like,
It puts a little
so
bit of the pressure off.
yeah, it takes the pressure off. So when he finally sends them, I will probably sit down and catch up on everything.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
part of it is, like there was a time when I was reading everything as it came out because I write the comics coverage for Explorer. I need to be on top of everything.
Right.
But we also the editor John Freeman and I, like, we got far ahead. I was writing my articles for issue 14 while issue 9 was coming out, I think,
Hmm.
maybe 8. So I got really far ahead, and because it doesn't come out every month, I was something like a year ahead on the year and a half ahead on the articles. And I was like, yeah, I've got time to totally fall behind. It's okay. But
Yeah. The we've gone for about an hour 15 here. And I actually the reason I like asked you about that book because I was like, we need to actually talk about Star Trek books before we get out of here
that is
tonight.
true. I forgot the name of your. That's right. Yeah, given the name of your
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, the like I said, I started with the books
Well, then I'll
and
show you this
then
because here's another Star Trek book that's
right.
from Joe Baronato
Yeah.
that that Mark Martinez and I and pretty much uh, everybody that I know in Star Trek is in this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one that's on my wish list. I don't have a copy of that one yet.
Oh, I recommend it
But
highly because you're a
yeah,
comics collector. That book is
yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, I started with just the books, and then I wasn't finding too many of them locally, and my wife reminded me that I used to read comic books, and I was like, okay, I guess I could buy some Star Trek books, comic books, and you know how that snowball happens.
It's a rabbit
But
hole the size of a black hole, and it sucks
right,
you.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you showed off a couple of your great treasures, and I just got two from IDW's web exclusive store where they'll do exclusive copies of books. They did a hardcover of the
Oh, cool.
whatever the subtitle was for this. Yeah, Commit No Mistakes,
Yeah,
and then the one that is topical to the holiday
that was
is
fun.
yeah, like this one. I love the idea behind it. And I met
I'm amazed
JK.
no one's done it before.
Right.
That
Well,
title, as soon as that title was announced, I was like, how did nobody ever do that before?
right. Yeah, and
That that title is just waiting for someone to pick up on it. Yeah.
I met JK Woodward at this last Shore Leave, and he did a cover of Riker turning into a
Hmm.
werewolf.
The
That like
werewolf.
I
Yeah.
bought a poster of it, and it's hanging up in my office now. It's fantastic.
JK is one of the most talented artists I've ever seen work on Star Trek.
Yeah,
Anytime his name is on a book, it's going to be good.
yeah,
No matter how it's written, it's going to be really beautiful because his art is amazing.
it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this the Halloween series was something that I think came with Heather Antos
Yes.
coming doing the weekly Halloween stuff
Hmm.
with the Vader's Castle, and when I made the connection that she used to do like the Star Wars stuff, and
She
then
did
like
Star Wars.
this,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
Dr. Afra, if I remember correctly, right? I think that's what she edited. I
I'm
could be
not
wrong.
sure. Yeah, I'm
I think
not
it must have been
knowledgeable
Dr.
about.
Afra. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea of like a weekly Halloween story, like I
Mhm.
think is a fantastic idea because you got 1 month to tell your story. Really, is when everyone's celebrating the holiday, and like this kind of stuff. Like I just spoke with Chris Sequela 2 or 3 weeks ago about this and like 70 other things, but like he's up for doing another one. So I'm a huge advocate for having another one of these done, either with the same team or just like having that holiday like kind of evergreen story that they can like just reprint every year and get
Would they
people
call
into
it
it.
Halloween 2? Because if so, Michael Myers would have to be in it.
Maybe or Halloween 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, but I love that
Season of the
IDW's.
Space Witch. That'll be Halloween 3.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, so I actually hear my wife rattling around in the kitchen making us dinner right now. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for having a conversation with me. It's
Oh, of course.
fantastic to put a voice to the face, and like we've talked so much on text and on Facebook. I
Yeah,
look forward to many more years of hanging out on Facebook and various websites and talking
absolutely.
about
And if
Trek.
you ever want to do this again, feel free to let me know. This was fun.
I definitely will. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome. Take
Have a
care,
good
man.
night.
Bye.